how to model a basic character here. So a stylized, simplified character. And this beginning process is going to be something called polymodeling. And these initial steps are pretty much the same steps that I do whether I'm modeling a simple character like this or modeling a human head, with like a photorealistic human head. It's the beginning steps that I'm going to show here are going to be pretty much the same. And I'll show you just how to set up your interface and introduce some common tools. And so this lesson is going to be spread out into multiple videos. So just keep that in mind. So this is just going to be the start of it here. So the orthographic reference image, I imported it in already. I have my project set up already. So I set up my project window and all that. I put my orthographic reference image on a display layer, and the display layers are over here under this tab to the right. Information on how to do all those steps are in other video tutorials here in this series, so just look for those if you need a reminder. So we're going to start today with the modeling process. So to model, I like to typically stay in we have these different workspaces up here, and I like to stay in Maya Classic and make sure the modeling toolkit is open to the right. And then additionally, on the left side, I like to make sure that the outliner is open. So I will, if that's not visible for you, just go to Windows and Outliner right there to open up this window. And this window lets you see everything that's in your scene. So I name my reference image Ortho, for instance, and it's right there. And otherwise, the scene is empty at the moment. The next thing I'll do to set up is I'll go up to the top. We have all these different mesh windows up here, and Mesh Tools has 3 tools that I'm going to demonstrate today that I pretty much always use when I'm doing polymodeling, especially a character like this. So Mesh Tools, I'll just click on this double dotted line that's right below my cursor right there. So if you click that double dotted line, the menu will break off, and I just drag it over here and I'll leave it off to the side so that I can access those tools. Finally, when it comes to modeling, I like to use my reference image to kind of trace the design, and I like to also keep my perspective view open as well. So if you look over here to the left, we have this button right here, which just means that we'll have one view, which is what we're on right now, the perspective view. If you want 4 views, you click this button right here. So we have the perspective view, top, front, side right there. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the 2 view. So right here. So I click that button right there. Sorry, right there. And so to the right, I have the perspective view. And use the option button to move your camera around here with the 3-button mouse. And then to the side here, I have the front orthographic view. If this currently is showing the top or the side, if you want to change it, you just go to the top of this window right here up to Panels, and then you can choose which orthographic view you want to look to by going to Orthographic and then choosing front, side, or top. So front is good, but if you want to switch to the top, for instance, you just click that and now it's to the top view, and I'm going to switch it back to the front view. And so even though I didn't show this, I'm just going to describe it quickly, is the orthographic reference image that I brought in. I imported it by going to View, Image Plane, and Import from the front view. So I imported it in this view, not in the perspective view. It'll kind of come in different and in the wrong way if you import it from the perspective view. So be sure to import your reference image from the orthographic view and then make the adjustments there. So I have everything set up and we're ready to model. So this is a very simple rounded character right here that I'm making. And whether I'm modeling this, and it's basically a head, right? There's not really a body. We're going to worry about the legs later. And then fur is going to obscure a lot of this character as well. So we can kind of afford to keep things relatively simple here. So I'm going to start. You might think that I would start with a sphere right here to start modeling this, But if I were to start with a sphere, let me just bring that into full screen here. There's already a lot of topology here. You could hypothetically model this with a sphere, but I need for the character's eyes and their eye sockets and their mouth to flow with the topology of this model. And a sphere primitive shape doesn't really give me a lot of room to maneuver in order to do that. So what do I mean by topology? Topology is the flow of the geometry lines here. And so if you're making any kind of character, whether it's a simple character or a complicated character, where there's full body or a face, you need the topology to flow with the character design some. And we'll kind of demonstrate that through this process right now. But I need to make some extrusions and some holes for the eye sockets right here and for the mouth. And for me, the sphere isn't going to work too well for that. So to start things off instead, I'm going to start with a primitive cube. So right to the side of it, this button right here where my cursor is, polygon cube. I'll just make that. And I'm going to keep it centered along the center axis right here, which is the y-axis, the vertical axis, right through the center of the character right there. Also make sure your orthographic reference image is centered along that line, because we're going to, a lot of what I'm going to do is just looking ahead to what we're going to do in the future here is I'm going to model the character head to our right, and then sometimes I'll work in symmetry mode, but sometimes I'm just going to delete the whole left side of the face and I'll mirror it over so that I'm only having to model the right side of the head, and then just do the mirror function and it'll kind of do half the work for me here. So I want to keep this cube along that y-axis. So I'm just going to press W, which is the move tool. Remember, move, rotate, scale is W, E, and R for your shortcuts. So I press W for the move tool and I'm just going to move it vertically. And then I'll press R. And to scale it, I want this box to scale out uniformly. So in order to do that, I'm going to grab this yellow box and I'm just going to drag from left to right. If I grab the red box or the green box, or if we look in the perspective view, this blue box, it'll scale it out, but only in the direction that that box is pointing. So it won't be a square anymore. It'll turn into a rectangle at that point. And I want this to be a square. So this yellow box, I'm just going to drag from left to right with a normal click just to scale it out some. I'm keeping it center on the y-axis, but I'll press W just to move it down a little bit. And I'm not going to worry too much about getting it perfect. And we got our cube in place. You know, nothing fancy. I'm just moving it up and down, scaling it uniformly to get into position. So from there, this is particularly easy for my character because my character is like a little walking, talking tennis ball almost. It's just, he's very spherical. If you have a character that has a more elongated face or anything like that, you'll want to kind of, at that point, you might want to take this rectangle box and scale it out so it's not uniform. You know, so scale it so that it fits the outside of the head is the idea here. So check the top, check the bottom, check the sides, and I'm more concerned about getting this side than the left side. So I kind of approximately got it out to where it matches the right side of the head. So now that I have that in position, and I'll just check in the perspective view, that looks okay to me. So now I'm going to worry about getting some nice rounded edges on this thing. And again, this is the process I use, whether it's a character like this or a photorealistic head, these initial steps. So from here, I'll just press smooth. So look in the modeling toolkit and look for the smooth button and click that with and make sure, sorry, before you do that, just make sure that this is selected in objects mode. So remember, when you right click, you have objects mode. To select the whole object, you can select edges to edge mode right there. You have vertices for the individual vertices, and then right click and hold right click to get this breakout menu. And then you have face mode where you can select faces. So make sure it's in objects mode and press smooth. And It should double the geometry right there. If it does more than double the geometry, you might have your division set up beyond 1. So if it's set up to like 2 or 3, you'll get more subdivisions there, and you actually don't want that. A big philosophy for polymodeling is that you want to keep your poly count as low as possible for as long as possible, and it'll just make your life a lot easier as you're modeling here. If you add too much geometry too quickly, it'll get out of hand and it'll end up usually in a lower quality model, and it'll also be more of a pain in the neck to deal with while you're in the process. So just one subdivision right here. I'll press Q to get out of that, and then I'll select this. So one thing I'm going to do, just to help us see here, and this might not have happened on your default, is if you look on the left side of my screen, we can see through the model and see the orthographic reference image behind it. And the reason for that is I went up to, and I guess it saved my preferences from an earlier project here, is I went to shading and X-ray. So by default, it might look like that when you're working with it. And then especially in your orthographic view, it's going to be helpful to have this on X-ray mode. So just at the top of that panel, go to shading, and then go down to X-ray right here, and then your model will be see-through in that panel. And if you look over to the right in the perspective view, you'll notice that the model is still its default opaque color, which I prefer for the perspective mode. So I like to be able to see through my model in the orthographic view. You can do that by either doing the shading X-ray, or you could go into wireframe mode right here, and you can kind of see the model right there and still see through the character. So that's just kind of down to your preference. In order for the X-ray to work, you just need to make sure that smooth shade is on rather than wireframe, and then obviously make sure that X-ray is on. So something else I like to do is, especially if I'm doing demonstrations, but also if I'm modeling on my own, is I'll select the model. And you see all these icons up here? Some of these can be really helpful if you just kind of start to look them up and kind of memorize what each of these do. And this button right here is called Wireframe Unshaded. And so if you look at my model now, when it's unselected, it looks like that. And now I'm going to click this button right here. It's like the greenish blue box with the white box around it. And that's Wireframe Unshaded. So now when I click off the model, you see how I have these blue edges right here. So it just helps show me what the topology is doing, even when the model's not selected. So I kind of prefer to have it on that way, but that's totally up to you. And again, you can customize it for each panel, whether it's the orthographic or the perspective view. So we have our full model here. As we model, I'm going to make sure, so I'm going to right click and go to vertex just to demonstrate this, is these vertices right here that go along the center, I just want to make sure that those stay along that 0 point of the y-axis. So try to keep those centered. If they do get off centered, let's say that you kind of grab a few vertices by mistake and you drag them out like that by mistake. If you want to get those centered back on the y-axis, just select them again, and then look up at the top here, the top bar, and look for this XYZ up here. Do you see that? And if you're not seeing that on your screen, your screen might look like this, where you just don't see it. Look for these little tabs right here, and you might need to expand one of these tabs to see that XYZ, but I use this a lot and it's a really helpful tool. So I just click this little tab right here, and you just might have to look for it for a second, but right there. And then where it says X, I have that vertice selected, and I want to just punch it down so that it's on the 0. You see the x-axis is right here from left to right. So if I just type 0 right here, keep your eye on this vertice, but where it says X right here, I'm just going to type 0, return, 0, return, there we go. And it punches it right to the 0 point. So try to keep these on axis, but if they get off axis, that's the step to fix it, and it's really simple. Just under X, type 0, return, and as long as your character is facing forward here, it should punch those center vertices back to the center again. So as we begin to model this, I'm going to right click and go back to object mode. I'm just going to look at the outside model. I might want to scale up my model just the tiniest bit overall. And as we model this, there's kind of two ways to work, and both are fine. You can, if you look in the modeling toolkit over here, you can look for this tab right here where my cursor is that says symmetry. And if you turn symmetry on for object X, so I just turned it on just then by clicking the arrow and going down to object X right there. Now, if I select a vertex on either side, you see how it selects the vertex on the corresponding other side? And I'll press W for the move tool. And you see as I move one side, it makes the adjustment to the other. So this can be a really helpful tool. And another way to do this, and this can be helpful particularly as your model gets more complicated, a lot of the times I'll do it this way. And again, these are two ways of doing the exact same thing, is I will go into face mode by right-clicking, holding down and going to face. I'll delete the left side of the face, just delete that out. And then I'll do all my modeling on this right side here. And then once I have it into a spot where I want to see the whole thing again, I'll just press the mirror button, which is this icon right here. And if you don't see that icon right there, just make sure you're under the poly modeling tab up here rather than one of these other ones. So poly modeling, and look for this button right here. You can also find the mirror function. I don't believe it's under the modeling toolkit over here, but you can find it under mesh and then mirror. And the good thing about finding the mesh mirror option under this window is you have this options box available. So if you need to click on that options box, you can change the direction in which it's mirroring. So if your character's facing forward like mine is, you want to mirror it. If you look down here, you can see the XYZ reference. Mirroring it negatively over the X direction is going to work for me. But if your character is facing a different way, you might need to adjust this. So this should be set up correct. And so if I press the mirror function, you see it just mirrors it right over. I press Q to get out of it, and I'll have whatever geometry I modeled on the right side will be mirrored over to the left side again. So I'll just edit undo. And I'm going to work with symmetry on. So in the modeling toolkit, I'm just turning on symmetry with object X on. The advantage of working with symmetry X on right here is that you can see the whole model in real time as you're modeling, which is helpful. The problem with it is sometimes glitches will happen this way, and that can be annoying. And so just, you need to, if you're working this way, just keep an eye out for if anything weird happens, you know. So that's kind of the give and take between symmetry versus mirroring to kind of get your symmetry here. And one other note is, even if your character is going to be asymmetrical in the end, I would recommend modeling them symmetrically here and then waiting for one of the later steps I'll show to add your asymmetry here. I'll take this character from Maya, bring him into Mudbox, and during that Mudbox phase is usually where I'll kind of start to add that asymmetry if I want it there. So with that said, let's start modeling here. So there's only a few steps I'm going to show in this first lesson, and it's just the initial steps to getting the topology kind of going in the right way here. So the first thing I'm going to worry about is the eye socket. And so I'll need to add some edge loops to kind of further define this geometry. And I basically want to create some a polygonal area for this eye socket right here that'll kind of flow naturally. So how do you add edge loops? So there's 3 tools I'm going to show here, and 2 of them are how to add edge loops. The first option is the most common one, which is the multi-cut tool. So you can find the multi-cut tool in several places, but if you look in the modeling toolkit to your right, it's this button right here. And you can also find it under this mesh tools window that I broke out right there. So the multi-cut tool, you can operate it in 2 different ways. So the first way, I'll just click it, and let's see if I can get my model to respond. Here we go. So you can see your cursor should look like this, you know, what you see on the screen. And with the multi-cut tool, you can basically, this first way of operating, you can add in topology manually. So if I want to add connect to this vertice right here, I just hover my cursor until the vertice turns blue. And if I want to add a new vertice over this edge, then I'll hover it till the edge turns blue. So the best way to learn this is just to practice it, but I'll demonstrate. So I'll start on this vertice, click on it, and now I want to bring an edge out and bring it to this edge right here. So I'll just hover the cursor over the edge till it turns blue where I want that line to go, and then I'll click again, and you see the line continues. I'll bring it down to this edge, so I'll hover it over this edge till it turns blue, click again, and notice since I'm in symmetry mode, it's doing on both sides, which is nice. And so now to finish off the loop, I'll just bring it back, and let's say I want to bring it back to this vertice right here. So I'll hover the cursor until that vertice turns blue, click on it, and then press when I'm ready. The line's not fully drawn in yet, it's kind of temporary right now. And in order to kind of get that line set in stone, I'll press return here. And you can see my cursor still has that kind of X-Acto knife look to it. So just to make sure I don't like draw more edges by mistake or something, I'll just press Q on my keyboard, which is the select button, to get out of that. So the multi-cut tool is a way that you can just manually add new geometry like that. And it's super helpful for repairing your meshes down the road here. But yeah, that's one way to do it. So I'll press edit undo to kind of get rid of that. So that's the first function of the multi-cut tool. The second function of the multi-cut tool is I press multi-cut, and I'm on a Mac right now. So if I hold Command, and I believe it's Alt on a PC, on your keyboard, you can, instead of drawing it in manually, if I hold Control, you can see it's giving me a preview of what it's going to do here. And you can just draw in a whole edge loop at a time here. So I'll just draw in an edge loop right here, and you see it's working symmetrically, which is great. So click right there. All I did was just a normal click, and you can see my cursor still is in multi-cut mode, so I'll just press Q to go back to normal after I'm done with it. And you'll see here that it added an edge loop. If you want to select an edge loop, just right click, go to edge, and then double click the edge, and it'll select the whole edge loop for you there. And yeah, so that's the multi-cut tool. So let's move on to the cousin of the multi-cut tool. And the multi-cut tool, just to kind of step back for a minute, is a tool that I use a lot, and it's for typically I'll use it the most if I'm modeling something that is a little less organic than what we're about to do, so like a table, chair, etc. It's also, again, super helpful for repairing meshes that have faces with more than 4 sides, n-gons, just repairing models that need a little bit of cleanup. It's super helpful. So that's the multi-cut tool. The cousin of the multi-cut tool is the insert edge loop tool right here, which is under that mesh tools menu. Remember, the mesh tools menu is this menu that I broke off. So it started out up here, and then I broke it off with a double dotted line and then brought it down here. And so the insert edge loop tool is right here. And if I, by default, let me just check my settings here real quick. But if you've never used the edge loop tool before, ignore what I just did there. If you've never used the insert edge loop tool, by default, you'll just click on it and then it won't do anything if you click on like a face right here. But notice how my cursor changed to kind of indicate that we're in insert with edge loop tool. It's now like a white cursor without this, like a little more simplified. And if you hover your cursor over an edge, so let's say I want to draw an edge loop that goes vertically, then I'll draw on this horizontal edge and make sure that I'm on the edge, and then I'll just click and hold, and you can drag it left or right to determine where you want that edge loop to go. And then just let go when you're ready, and bam. It does, so by default, the edge loop tool does precisely the exact same thing as the multi-cut tool did when we pressed Control or Alt. But what I like to do with the edge loop tool to make it a different tool and thus more helpful here is I go to Insert Edge Loop with Edge Loop, go to the Options box right to the right of it, and click on that to expand this menu. And then you'll get this window. and then make sure insert with edge flow at the bottom here is turned on. So just make sure that's turned on. And as long as you do that, for the rest of your project, you shouldn't have to mess with that options box again at that point. It should just remember it, and you'll be good to go from here. So now I'm going to add a horizontal edge loop just to demonstrate this. So before I do, remember the multi-cut tool edge? And so that multi-cut tool is what I used to draw this edge loop right here that's selected orange. And if you look up here to the top at this edge right here, notice that that's flat right there. So adding this edge loop didn't really change the shape of anything at all. Or it kind of, how do I say this? It just kind of drew an edge loop as if someone drew a marker on a balloon, but I'll show this here in a second. So insert with edge loop tool. Remember that I turned that option on just a moment ago, the insert with edge flow. So insert with edge loop, I'm going to add a horizontal line. I'm going to add the line here where my cursor is, and keep your eye to the right here at this edge where my cursor is. So keep your eye there. And then so I'm going to just, I clicked on an edge. Remember, you have to click on an edge in order for this to work. Just a normal left click. And then you drag it to where you want it to go. And then just let go when you're ready. And do you see how this edge rounded out there? So when you're building out any kind of organic character, they're almost certainly going to be rounded, at least to some degree here. And so if you're modeling an organic character and you're adding edge loops, just definitely lean towards adding the edge loop tool rather than the multi-cut tool. Because if you're using the multi-cut tool, you see how that edge stayed flat up here where my cursor is? In order to kind of get that rounded and organic looking, you're going to have to manually fix each of these edges or vertices first in the front view, just like manually drag them around till it gets rounded here. And you're just going to be spending a lot of time like making that minor fix to get your model up to par. And it's a huge pain in the neck here. So insert edge loop with edge flow turned on is the better way to add an edge loop with a rounded organic model. So I'm going to press edit undo just a bunch of times just to get back a little bit. And okay, so those are two tools I wanted to show here at this moment. And then finally, the third tool I want to show is the slide edge tool. So let's say that you drew in this edge loop right here. Actually, I'm just going to keep editing undoing. There we go, just to get back a little further. I'm going to add an edge loop with edge flow right here. And remember, what I'm trying to do overall is I'm trying to get these faces right here that I have selected to become the eye sockets for the character. So that's the goal. Again, I'm just demonstrating three tools before I really get started on the modeling process. So the slide edge tool is the next tool I want to show you, which is if I have this edge selected right here, and let's just say that in terms of topology, it's not flowing exactly where I want it to go. You would think you would just press W and move it around or scale it up in order to get it to go where you want it to go. But do you notice here as I drag it to the left, you see how the character's shape changes up here? Like it's no longer rounded, it turns into a square head, like it changes the shape of the model. So the slide edge tool, I'm just going to press edit undo there. There we go. The slide edge tool is a really helpful tool to move the topology, but while you're moving the topology, Maya will kind of respect the shape of the model that you've already created here. So really helpful as you're kind of fixing the topology on your model. So the way to use it is a little weird. It's right here under mesh tools, and it's the slide edge tool. So just double click it, and then when you double click it, I think it'll be right here. A tiny little message that's grayed out should show up that says middle mouse button. And what that means is to use the slide edge tool, you have to use the middle mouse button on your mouse in order to kind of operate it. So I'll show that here. So just double click instead of single clicking, just to make sure it selects here on slide edge tool. Oh, it showed up here. So drag with middle mouse button to slide is what it says. And so now I make sure that I have the right edge selected. So you just select it normally with your left click. But then if I want to use the slide edge tool to slide it around, I just press middle click on my mouse, my 3-button mouse. And then as I slide it, do you see now as I slide the edges around, it kind of generally kind of respects that rounded shape that I want to keep with the model. So the slide edge tool is something I'm going to demonstrate further, but it's probably more helpful than you might think. It comes up a lot here, especially as we get further into this poly modeling process. So those are the 3 tools. I'm going to press edit undo just to kind of, now that I'm done kind of walking through those initial concepts. And we're back to where we started, which was essentially I had a cube, I smoothed it, and then I smoothed the cube. Sorry, I got a phone call and I had to silence it there. And just positioned it into place. So this is just a cube that's been smoothed and repositioned a little bit. And so to start the modeling process, and I'm not going to get too far before I cut off this tutorial, and we'll pick it up on the next tutorial, is I'll start with the insert edge loop tool. And again, I'm worrying about the eyes first. And so I want to create an edge loop that goes right down here where my cursor is, because I want to differentiate the eye from kind of this character doesn't have a nose, but the nose area right here. And so we need an edge loop to go through here to differentiate those, because right now the eye socket, if I made eye sockets, they would connect to the center of the face. Do you see that? So that's not what we want. So I'm going to go to insert with edge loop. And remember, edge flow is turned on. And so I'll just click on an edge and then drag it where I want it to go. So I'll click it right there. So this is pretty close. And so this seems a little weird, but keep in mind that if we look at this in vertice mode, so hold right click, go to vertice. This vertice is in a great spot right here because it's at the corner of where that eye is. This vertice is close. I might want to bring it in just a tiny bit. This vertice is good right here. And then this vertice I need to adjust. So, well, we're about to make those adjustments, but that brings me to why I like to just reemphasize why I like to work with the orthographic view, front view on the left, perspective view on the right, is sometimes if you're in the front view, and let's just say you only have the front view selected right here, and you're only modeling off of this, if I drag and select like this, and I grab some vertices and I start moving them around, check the perspective view, oops, edit undo, and you see in the back of the head, those vertices got selected over there as well. So essentially what I do is, especially in these early stages, is I'm using the orthographic view to kind of help me with my tracing, but then I'm using the perspective view to help me select hard to reach vertices or make sure that I'm not selecting vertices in the back of the head by mistake, because that can be a huge pain if you've been modeling for a while and then you look in the back and you realize, oh shoot, I've been like, messing up the back of the head this whole time. Very, very, very common problem that happens while modeling. So first thing I'm going to do when modeling this is I'm actually going to go to edge mode in this instance. And I'm just going to remember I'm in symmetry mode right now. So symmetry is turned on right here. So if I do something on the right, it'll also do it on the left. And I'm not going to bring the arrow left or right here. I'm just going to bring it down. And if you can see what I'm doing, I'm just trying to get it. Oops. I might give myself a little room there. I'm trying to get it so that this vertice right here kind of connects where the edge of that socket is. That vertice lines up with the drawing. This vertice could use a little work, so I'm going to make sure that it selects correctly and I don't select any in the back of the head. And I might just push this in a little bit just to kind of get it lined up. And then this vertice is lined up correctly. So we have that in a good spot. And that's about as far as we're going to get on this tutorial, but there's one last really important thing I want to show here. Is I can see there's probably something I'm going to want to shift around in here. is, so right now I'm working in what I call the 1 mode. If you look on your keyboard, there's shortcuts here. So 1 lets you see the model as it is. And then 3, if you press 3 on your keyboard, lets you preview what is this model going to look like once we smooth it. And so while I model, I am pretty often switching back and forth between 1 and 3. But try not to work with 3 selected or pressed, because keep your eye, let's just say, I'm in 3 mode right now where it's previewing the smooth, and keep your eye on this vertex. I'm gonna press 1 real quick. So press 1. You see how that, so my cursor is where the vertex is, and I'll keep my cursor still and I'll press 1. Do you see how that vertex jumps? So 3 is giving you kind of like a fake preview almost, in a sense, of what the thing will eventually look like when you smooth it. But it's kind of, do you see like the vertex shifted and it's not really where it says it was, and it's usually fine. But just for that reason, just to be safe, I like to work in 1 and then be going to 3 a lot, just to kind of check my work right here. So right click and face. And so right now, if I were to kind of do the next step, the eye sockets would look like that. But we're going to need to add some more edge loops into this model to kind of get it going here. So that's how to get started with poly modeling this character, the very first steps here. And so in the following videos, I'm going to show you the following steps here. But earlier on, we're going to be adding edge loops. And each time we add an edge loop, did you see how I added an edge loop, but I took the time to make adjustments on the model so that it lined up? I didn't just add an edge loop right there, click an edge loop, and then move on to the next edge loop right away. I made that edge loop, and then I made the adjustments I wanted to make on it. My character, again, is a round character, so like I didn't need a ton of adjustments, but to get the eye sockets kind of where I wanted them, I did to make just a few. And so every time I add an edge loop, I add it, make adjustments to it, make sure it looks good, double check it in a couple different views, then move on to the next edge loop. And I guarantee you, if you kind of follow that process, it's going to make this a lot less of a bumpy ride for you during the modeling process. Okay, so until next time, so we'll pick this up in the next video.